No, she's graduated, and
Time flies.
we are live, Dennis. So, good morning, everybody here in the United States. This is Reed Cohen of Imprint Tours. Welcome to another week of Where in the World programming. We've got a really good week this week that focuses on China. You can see the Temple of Heaven behind me. I've chosen for my backdrop. Our guest this morning is Dennis Yang, who's in Beijing. So good evening to you, Dennis. It's very late at night there. How you doing?
Good. Good morning to you, Reed. Good morning, everyone.
So we're going very early. And before we jump in and start talking to Dennis about life in China right now, I want to let you know about the rest of our programming for the week. On Wednesday, we'll be broadcasting again from China, again at this early hour, because I'm very anxious to talk about some of the less known places in China. Today, we'll talk about the China that you're all familiar with: Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong, Xi'an, and the Terracotta Warriors. That'll be the background for our discussions today. But on Wednesday, I want to talk about what I call China off the beaten track, which I'm very excited about. So we'll have Dennis back again on Wednesday at this time. And then at our normal broadcast time at 10 a.m. Pacific time and 1 p.m. Eastern time, we'll be talking to my good friend and colleague, Charlie Rawson, who spent quite a bit of time as an expat in Beijing. So we want to get an American perspective on that. Dennis is housebound in Beijing with certain COVID protocols there. He just came from another city, so he has to stay in the house for a while. So he'll be unable to do a virtual tour for us, but maybe we'll schedule that later on when Dennis can move about freely. But we are going to have sort of an encore performance. My colleague Hisa from Japan, you'll recall we were unable to complete our Japanese programming on Where in the World a few weeks ago. He's going to be doing a virtual tour of the Fushimi Shrine just outside of Kyoto. That'll be late at night here in the United States, about 10 p.m. Seattle time on Thursday, which is Friday early afternoon for Hisa in Japan. So just wanted to let you know about our programming. I will also be preparing a PowerPoint, sort of a dual PowerPoint based on our tour of China that we did with Dennis a couple of years ago, as well as our, some images of our off the beaten track tour. So sorry, I know that was a lot of information. As you know, on Where in the World coffee chat here, we're going to have an informal conversation about China with Dennis. We really encourage you, if you happen to have gotten up early and are tuning in while you're having your morning coffee, if you have questions or comments for Dennis, I'll be monitoring that on my phone, and I'll bring those into the conversation live if you send something there in the chat function there on Sarah's Facebook page. Okay, that was a lot, Dennis. Welcome again, and
thank you.
And tell us. I have a really important, serious question to ask you first. Where did you get that St. Louis Cardinals baseball cap you're wearing?
I was a adoption coordinator for 10 years. For a American adoption agency, Children's Hope International. So I have adopted families from the US. So when they were here, when we were saying goodbye to each other, they gave me some gift. So I got different t-shirts, different hats. That is why.
So no sentimental loyalty to the St. Louis Cardinals baseball club. Is that correct?
Not really. Well, I'm just wearing this because I don't need to, buy any more t-shirts or hats. So,
well, I've got
really.
Sorry, go ahead.
Not really a fan or loyal to any team.
I've got my football T-shirt on. I've got my Seahawks championship T-shirt from a number of years ago. I still live in the past when it comes to the Seahawks. And before we leave this frivolous subject, I grew up in Southwest Missouri, which is St. Louis was our only nearby professional sports teams, and when I was about 9 years old, and I'm dating myself now, when the St. Louis Cardinals were in the World Series in 1967 and 1968, I was in second grade, as I recall. And in those days, baseball games were only during the day. So baseball was such a big thing in our little town that they let school out at 1 o'clock every day when there was a World Series game, so that everybody could watch it on the 3 channels that we got on our television in the 1960s. So I decided right then and there that I should be a fan if I got to get out of school. I knew nothing about baseball before that, but having said that, that's the St. Louis Cardinals are my lifetime team, right? I've got a friend who says one life, one team, right? You don't change loyalties just because you end up moving to another town. So I grew up a St. Louis Cardinals fan. So I'm very pleased to see you wearing a hat. And I'm going to ignore the fact that you don't care about the team.
Yeah, Children's Home, the adoption agency, they were home based in St. Louis.
Got it.
Yeah.
I had it on my notes to ask you about your work with the adoption agency, with children, with orphans. I couldn't think of the word there for a moment. Tell us a little bit more about that. How did you get involved with that? Did you like that work? Are you still involved in any way? Go ahead and share a little bit about that. I think that's interesting for our viewers.
Okay. So back to 2020, I had a big argument with my dad, who wanted me to take exam to be government employee. So we disagree with each other. I actually flee home, and I think I need to find a job. So I looked through the newspaper and found a travel agency was hiring. So I went there and was interviewed, and they offered me the job. So I became a tour guide since then. And the adoptive families, when they flew to China to claim abandoned babies from the Chinese orphanage, the paperwork need to be finalized at the capital city of each province where their children were from. So my hometown Nanning was the capital city of Guangxi province. So my travel agency had a lot of business, a lot of clients from the adoptive families. So I got a chance to work for them, and that was how I was involved in the adoption. And I worked from 2020 through the end of 2010, so 10 years. And I really enjoyed it because I can improve my English. I can talk to real foreigners, but also because I get to see how those abandoned babies finally, they were held in the arms of those families, and they finally had a family, and they were loved. And I still had some connection with some of my adoptive families on Facebook, and I get to see how those children thrived. They went to high school, they graduated from university. So I actually had 2 of my my kids. They friend me on the Chinese WeChat, so we get to talk to each other. So I really feel I was blessed to be a part of that, during those years. So I still miss that, and I'm not really doing any more, adoption, helping the adoptive families, but I'm still helping some orphanage for their programs for the older kids. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that sounds like a pretty fascinating background, and I suppose do you find we're going to talk about your involvement in the travel industry here in just a moment. But since we're talking about the placement service that you were a part of, do you find that that enters into your guiding at all? Did you learn any life lessons from that experience that you brought to bear? I know you said that it helped you improve your English, which is excellent, by the way. But can you answer that question? Is there anything that you can think of
Yes,
that
sure.
has influenced the way
Yeah,
you guide?
yeah, because the orphanage is not open to a lot of people, not even to the Chinese people. So a lot of Chinese people, they actually don't know about the international adoption. So the Tokyo Olympic game, there was this Canadian girl. She was adopted by this Canadian couple many years ago, and now she's competing on behalf of Canada, and she won a gold medal.
Yeah.
And a lot of Chinese people were shocked to learn about her background, how she was abandoned and how she was adopted by the Canadian, how she thrived, and now she won a gold medal for Canada. So a lot of Chinese people, they were shocked, and after the media keep digging, the Chinese people started to realize that, wow, this has been going on in our country for more than 20 years, and like even for United States, there are over 100,000 Chinese abandoned babies were adopted, and they living in the U.S. So not many people get to know that. So when I was guiding, I can share a lot of this kind of background, this kind of information. The past that the government is actually shy to talk about it. In the past when we were still poor, we were not very proud to talk about that. We actually need help from overseas. Need help to take care of our babies. So a lot of people didn't know about all those things. So when I was guiding, I can share information about how did it happen, why, and what is really going on, and what change have been made, and what effort was made to help those kids. And so I can tell from another perspective, not just sightseeing, not just like how old this building is. It helped me. My former employer, the adoption agency, they actually did a lot of charitable things in China, like help raising money for the orphans to do surgery, and we provide vocational education for the older orphans who could not be adopted. So I can get into the hospital to see many impoverished families, and I get to visit many places in the countryside, and actually even Chinese people in the big city don't get to know what's really going on there. So I can add those into my guiding information and share with my travelers from overseas. So present them a more how to say different perspective on this country. Yeah.
I know that when I brought my first group to China, it's now almost 40. Well, it's past 4 years ago. It was early in 2017. My group was fascinated by that. They wanted to hear your stories. They wanted to talk to you privately about it. That was something that really made an impression on them. Now you talked about guiding groups around. Do you ever guide Chinese people around, or is it always Westerners coming to visit China that you work with?
So my hometown, the capital city of Guangxi, not having a lot of groups from other countries. So when our travel agency did not have enough job for me, they also asked me to guide Chinese people. So I used to lead Chinese people travel across the country, like go to Shanghai, go to the Yellow Mountain, go to We also went overseas. I led group to South Korea, to Vietnam, to Thailand, and and also took Chinese student to the U.S. Before the outbreak. Yeah.
So we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but how do you find that Chinese groups are different from, let's say, American groups like my group?
Most of the Chinese groups, they first they focus on shopping. Yeah, because they don't have a lot of chance. Financially, they cannot afford for a lot of trips to travel, overseas, and actually they cannot afford for a decent trip, because you go to Shanghai, go to the Yangtze River Delta, the cost the travel agency charge them, it's not very high, but they have to do a lot of shopping, so the travel agency can make profit from the commission. So the Chinese people develop a habit to shop, so they always have this need. Secondly, about their destination. For example, if you go to visit a cave, Chinese people are less interested to know how this cave was formed million years ago, and there was a volcano involved, things like that. They don't care about that. They more like to hear fairy tales. So, for example, oh, that rock, that's stalagmite look like Monkey King. Oh, the Monkey King look. The other rock look like the shepherd. Oh, that look like the fairy lady. So you have to arrange different information if you are leading Chinese group. And thirdly, Chinese group are very impatient. They always like go, 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 go. So they only spend little time at a destination and move to the next destination. They try to cover more in a short time, so to make the money feel well spent. So they always seems like they're always in a rush. So I think those are the three main difference. Yeah.
A lot of things that you described is also true about many American travelers. I know that my group does not fit those categories. We're not a shopping tour. We make that clear. Of course, everybody still likes to shop and buy fun things that they don't see at home. We get that. But we don't orient our tours around shopping. We don't do any kickback shopping like you were talking about. And of course, I'm very proud of our clientele. I think that the people that travel with Imprint Tours are curious. They do want to learn. They want to understand the culture. Of course, we promote that from an administrative end, and we encourage that. But of course, that's the way they come to us. That sort of person is attracted to our tour. But there are other tour companies operating in the United States and abroad with Americans that fit more closely to what you're describing. Maybe not the impatient part. I'm curious. What about the volume? Right? I think Americans are famous in Europe for being one of the louder groups. The French are certainly quieter. The Germans are quieter. Italians maybe not, but Americans have that reputation of being loud. And I have to admit, when I encounter Chinese groups abroad, like when I'm working in another part of the world and there are Chinese groups, they do tend to be quite loud. Is that your experience as well? Is that a fair thing for me to say?
Yeah. You can imagine that Chinese people, they had this tradition. They live very close to each other, like always have big families, big population. So they develop no tradition to have a sense of privacy. Like, for example, people like to ask, is your daughter married? How much money the boy's family gave? And they ask how much money you make, they probe into other people's privacy. So they live very close. So they intend to, leave no space. So noise, like affecting other people, disturbing other people, have never ring a bell to most of the Chinese people. And also, we had this, noise pollution. So people living in a very noisy place. For example, when we went overseas, even in Thailand, we can find very peaceful village. And when we were in the US, not living in the big city like Houston, but we live in the, the suburb of Houston. So we found that it's very quiet. It's very hard, very rare to find places like that in China, where people live in a living quarter, in a community that is so quiet. Everything's so loud. You have music playing like at midnight. You have people eating barbecue, lamb chop outside, drinking beer, and doing their gambling, and they scream. They're so loud, but people show a lot of tolerance to that. So, but living in such an environment, everybody had to raise their voice so they can hear each other. So when they travel, it's hard to change their force of habit. So they still intend to, scream. So catch a lot of people's attention.
Yeah. My anecdote about that was you took us to Chengdu back in 2017. We went to see the Panda Rehabilitation Center there and nearby Leshan Buddha. Fantastic visit, by the way. Every day was awesome on that tour. But we were in a high-rise hotel that particular time in Chengdu, big city. And I got into the elevator with 4 Chinese businessmen. And I was on the elevator for, I don't know, 30 seconds, 45 seconds to go up to the 17th floor or whatever. And those 4 men, I have of course, no idea what they were talking about, but they were shouting in an elevator, right? It's a closed space. There's a little bit of white noise, but a relatively quiet environment. And they were just, I was very uncomfortable for me. I couldn't wait to get out of the elevator. They were so loud.
Yeah.
And I think you've touched on a good explanation of they grow up, the typical Chinese person grows up in an environment where there isn't real privacy. And so they don't, plus there are, the way that people are raised is certainly something that is culturally driven. And of course, from one culture to another, that's going to be different. Because I know that as more and more Chinese people are traveling internationally, that's something in my professional life of the last 25 years in tourism, I've seen, when I started in the 90s, you didn't see any Chinese groups. It was very, very unusual to see Chinese groups in Europe. But in the last, 10 years, that number has surged to the point where Chinese groups are actually the dominant travel group in much of Europe. And so they tend to be in very large groups, and they tend to, by Western standards, I'm not making a judgment here, but they come across as rather rude, right? If they bump or jostle you, they don't say, excuse me. If they step on your feet, they don't wait for their turn in line. And I think it's important for our viewers to it's very easy to get frustrated with that and to see them as ugly tourists, in the same way that Americans used to be called ugly Americans when they traveled abroad, and still sometimes they are. But I think your explanation is applicable here, that they just don't grow up with the same sort of instruction about not staring, about waiting your turn. And so it's definitely a cultural difference. So do you think I'm on the mark here?
Yeah. Most of the people who could afford to travel to Europe, to US, or to Canada, to Australia, they not actually really middle class according to the West. Many of the people join travel agency who will bring like 40 Chinese people and put them on a big tourist bus and only visit iconic cities like Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. and they will eat, Chinese buffet. They will bring them to Chinese restaurant, and they will have a Chinese agency in the US to pick up this group. And they had Chinese tourist guide who's speaking Chinese, and they try to cover like many destination in like 12 days to make the money very worth it. So many of these people who joined those group, who went to the US, went to Europe, they from small cities. So that kind of false habit is even more deeply rooted. So it's very hard for them to change for their first time travel to these big G7 countries. But also there are also wealthy Chinese families, wealthy rising class. Many of them can afford for hiring a Caucasian, like a real, native speaker, hire real, maybe like a American Express agency to arrange the trip. They will live in a 5-star hotel in the US, like the Waldorf Hotel, and they will they will rent a car in the US and do a road trip. So those people, they're more, they're better educated. They even went to overseas for their education. So when they're traveling, they're more aware of being, polite. They will use fork and knife, or they go to a restaurant. They will be aware that, don't disturb other people. They will tip a waitress. They will, hold the door for other people. So it's been changed, but slowly, because our population is so big. So most of the Westerner, when they see those Chinese group, the majority of them are still the people who had a very long tradition that affecting them. They had a very big false habit, very hard to be changed.
Yeah. I have a terrible confession to make. I have Google Translate on my phone, and after I'd been to China with you, and I went back to Europe, and this is 4 years ago, tourism was just exploding in Europe, and I was still working there. And there were lots of Chinese groups. I actually saved on my phone in Chinese how to say, "You're not in China anymore, be quiet." And I did, it's not like I used it very often, but if there was really a group that was making my job hard, I'd go over to the tour leader and I'd hold up my phone. And show him my message. "You're not in China anymore. Please be quiet." Anyway, that's not my proudest moment, but it's helpful to understand the cultural differences and to be a little more tolerant. I guess the question that I want to ask you is, when I have a group that arrives in Italy or Germany or Greece, one of the first things I try to do is immediately educate the group on things that operate differently than they do in the United States. Mind you, we're all Western nations when it comes to Americans coming to Europe, but there are enough cultural differences that you need to make them aware of. And then, of course, when I bring a group to some place that's non-Western, it's very important to understand cultural mores and behaviors. For instance, in Thailand, you never touch a person's head. Well, Americans need to know that because they're liable to pat some kid's head out of affection and not understand that they were doing something very offensive. Anyway, sorry, that was long. Do you think there's any effort on the part of travel agencies, of Chinese tour guides that are taking Chinese people abroad to try to educate them a little bit about these things, or is it just too much trouble and it's all about getting them getting them to sites A, B, C, and D as fast as possible?
Before the outbreak, like you said, a lot of Chinese travel overseas to other countries, and the number were growing. But at the same time, it also bring a lot of issue, like what you described. For example, like people pick up rocks at the beach, where actually there's a sign says you're not supposed to pick it up, and people like litter, or people occupy the space that is private, and they use that private space to do their square dancing, like what they did in China. So those being spreading on the social media and kind of ruin the image of the country, and that hurts everybody's feeling, not just hurting the image of the government or the country. So actually, government issue some regulations, some guidelines to travelers themselves, to travel agency who arrange Chinese people travel overseas, and tell them, give them some do and not do's, and actually some people who violated, and for example, there were people in Moscow, they pee at I think next to a tower, and some people sit in the grass and eating their lunch where they're not supposed to, because there are fans around, and they just cross and go in there, and they got caught. So government put them on the blacklist. So I think they had like penalty that they're not allowed to travel overseas for like 1 year. So they carry out punishment like that. So I think that's one of the efforts to try to educate the Chinese tourists. When you travel overseas, you're not just doing it on your own. You are also a traveler on behalf of the country. So try to exert your effort to protect the reputation of the motherland. So that was what they were doing before the outbreak. Yeah.
Well, good. It encourages me to know that there is some of that going on, and I do understand that when you're talking about more than 1 billion Chinese people, that it's an uphill and slow battle to get some of those changes to take effect. All right, let's get back to just the topic of tourism in China, of your job there. Now, China has a rich and diverse history, much longer than Western history, and millennia longer than American history. How do you work that into your guiding when you're taking a group around? How do you work in Chinese history to what you're sharing?
Well, first, I love history. It has been my interest since I was a little boy. So I read a lot of books. I learned, I read a lot of books about like tomb raiders, or caves, or farming, how people did the Chinese farming back to 5,000 years ago, what kind of tools they were using, what they invented, and construction, how this technique was introduced from ancient India and evolved in China. So it has been my interest. And after I, joined the international adoption, I started to realize, there are more about our country, like daily people struggling, medical care, how people in the past, how they survived, like, plague, things like that, what the Tang Dynasty government did. So I will add those information in my guiding information, but I will also, because I was majoring in English, so I learned how to do cross culture. So I will make comparison, like, for example, this revolution in China was similar like what happened in Italy. So make it much easier for a foreigner to understand, or like use a term they're familiar with to describe to them. So make the long history, the mysterious history, more familiar, with their background. So I'll try to make a condensed milk of Chinese history and put into their coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. What is it about your job and your lifestyle that you most enjoy? I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear it from you.
I love traveling. I like interacting with people, and I like to share, information from different perspectives. Especially, after the outbreak, seems like the world we're living in is so torn apart, and I realized more that traveling. This is a exchange that people get to know different people, know their lives, know their history, know why people think differently, and understand each other more, and shorten the gap, close the gap. So I enjoyed my guiding, and I like that kind of freedom I have. Not just going to different places. I also enjoy the freedom that I can arrange the information, and I also love to hear different opinions from, for example, from your perspective. How you understand China when you firstly came to China. So that will also change my perspective, because I can be so proud of my country. Sometimes it's hard for me to face the mistakes we made in our history, and face some things that we still need to cope with, some area we still need to improve. So to interact with people from other parts of the country, it's nice, and I can also bring the information during the trip, like on an overnight train or at a Chinese restaurant. The conversation with local people at the train station, or some Chinese kids, or some students, or even a waitress. I can share the information, like an ambassador, interpreter, to help the Chinese, my fellow Chinese, to communicate with these foreigners. So build a relationship between them to reach the goal that we're living on the same planet, and just understand each other more, to face the same challenge. So I really enjoy that. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Much as I expected, knowing you as I do. What about your lifestyle do you least enjoy? Are you able to identify that?
I think traveling also have some, like, for example, in the past, before the outbreak, sometimes during high season, I can be away from home for 30 days or even 40 days. So I did not get to spend enough time with my parents. So that's what I felt regretful. So I felt obligated that I should have taken care of them more, instead of always travel. So I think that's the least part, the least I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's talk about that sort of classic Chinese. I mean, what I would identify as the classic tour of China. And I'm talking about from an American perspective now. What Americans know about Beijing, of course, Xi'an, mostly because of the terracotta warriors, maybe Chengdu that I talked about before, Guilin down south for sure, Yangtze River cruise, that's something all Americans know about, Hong Kong, Shanghai, those are the big hitters. With that circuit sort of in mind, what's your favorite place to take groups. Let's be specific. What's your favorite place to take Americans?
You mean among those iconic destinations?
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe Shanghai.
Shanghai, okay.
Yeah.
And why?
Well, Shanghai, you get to see, how the Western culture impact China since 1860. How a city, growing from a small, like a fishing village, into the so-called Paris in the east. How it's a mixture of the traditional China and Western, and also the city itself, the construction, and they have like propaganda museum. You can see it's quite open to the West. So here you can actually dig deeper about the modern China history, like especially after 1949. You can see how the timeline is, in just one city of Shanghai.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. I mean, Shanghai, I mean, everybody's different and sees things differently. Not my favorite stop in China, but I get what you're saying. I mean, that you've got that colonial presence, the Bund, that stretch along the river, that there's all those sort of 19th century colonial buildings. You wouldn't even know you're in China if you look in one direction. But if you turn the other way and look across the river, that Pudong skyline is just spectacular. Also very Western looking, very modern and Western looking. But yeah, the things that you identified are absolutely present there in Shanghai, where you get that sense of East meets West. Okay. Let's see. I don't want to venture too far into off the beaten track things, because we're going to talk about those on Wednesday. But what's the one thing visitors should not miss? I'm trying to decide whether to ask you outside of those iconic sites, or maybe from amongst the iconic sites. Let's say amongst the iconic sites that we sort of named off there, what's the one thing visitors should not miss?
Since coming to China, it's not easy, especially now, like applying for a Chinese visa, it's really hard. And actually, it costs a lot, because I know that the living cost in China is rising up. So for foreign tourists traveling to China, actually costs them a lot of money. So if they have, one opportunity to visit China besides those iconic cities like Shanghai, Beijing, of course, I can totally understand it's fair to visit the Great Wall, the Forbidden City, and the Terracotta Warriors. But if you have like a 8-day or 10-day in China, I really hope that I really encourage them to visit the rural China, to visit one of those small town in what I call the wild China, like in the less developed provinces like Gansu, like Guangxi, like my hometown, or like Yunnan, the province share border with Burma and Vietnam. So those much less developed rural areas, so people get to see the real China, because that's still the lifestyle of most of the Chinese people live every day. They still use water buffalo to plow the field, and kids still walking to school. And also there are a lot of outdoor market there. People actually don't go to a Chinese Walmart to purchase, their daily necessities. So I hope they can go there to see, what they don't get to see a lot from like China's central TV station like CCTV, not from like Time magazine or like from other mainstream media. Those they need to see by their own eyes. They had to set foods there in the fields, standing in that small town. Yeah.
Since you've mentioned the small towns, the rural side of China, how do you think tourism benefits those sort of places?
A lot of people in the small town, they don't have like opportunities like that's in Beijing. Beijing, Shanghai, those mega cities had a lot of opportunities. They have very good industry like automobile, pharmaceutical, factories. Small towns, they really rely on farming, service industry. So tourism is part of the service industry. A lot of people relying on restaurant, transportation, like some people driving tourist bus, selling souvenirs, being a porter, being a guide. And many of the people that running, they bought money from the bank or from the friends. They're operating a guest house, which had air conditioner, had a hot shower. And when we let groups go to those places, we help a lot. That we spend time in the restaurant, we hire a bus, and we spend money to buy the drinks, buy souvenirs, and we spend money in those guest house, which bring them more money than other Chinese tourists. So that helped a lot with the local economy, benefiting a lot of people who could not get a job in a big city, especially the people who did not have a good education background, because they couldn't go find a job in the big cities, so they got stuck in the hometown. So those are the kind of jobs they can get to make some money.
A similar subject matter here. At Imprint Tours, we're always trying to move beyond the facade of commercial tourism and get deeper into a culture, a better understanding, not just see those sort of polished, touristic, iconic things like the Temple of Heaven. How do you help your groups get beyond that, make more of a cultural connection? I mean, obviously, you've already talked about when you get to take them to a rural destination, you can help them get connected. I know when we did our tour together, we went and stayed up in the Devil's Backbone. We stayed in a very rustic guest house. That was a great cultural connection. We visited a tea plantation. That was a great cultural connection. Are there other ways that you personally try to help people to break through that facade of commercial tourism?
I would try to find chance for the group to have more interaction with the local families, like go to local family to had dinner there, and go to local school to be like half-day volunteers to practice oral English with the students, where they don't get to see a lot of foreign faces, usually.
Okay. So we're winding down on time here. Got a last couple of questions for you. My impression from my times in China are that your country is doing many things right. I mean, the travel infrastructure is spectacular there. Those bullet trains zipping everywhere. Every city has a brand new train station. Inevitably, the big train station is out of the center, but there's a metro connection that zips you right into the center. It's very, very easy to get around. The economy was, pre-pandemic was booming. I think you're still doing okay with that. But that development has a cost. The air pollution, I remember, is a problem pretty much everywhere. I had exceptional luck when I took this picture behind me. My first weekend in Beijing, a big storm had blown through and there were blue skies and I got spectacular images. Same thing at the Great Wall. But quite often as you travel around, air pollution is a problem. There's a lot of coal-fired power plants, et cetera. But I'm sorry, I'm rambling here. You also see wind power and solar power being developed at a much faster rate than here in the West. So I see a lot of things go in the right direction, but there seems to also be a cost. What's your take on all of that? How is China moving forward? What could they do better? What's your take? I think you might be frozen. I'm just going to give it a minute here to see if Dennis comes back to us here. We seem to have lost the connection for a moment. And he's not coming back. Well, we're almost to the end of our hour anyway. I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up here. I'm going to say thank you to Dennis for staying up late for us so that we can get up early and connect with him. I appreciate his willingness to share his perspectives on China. Don't forget, we'll have Dennis again at this same time, 10 p.m. Seattle on Wednesday to talk about China off the beaten track. I'm very excited to bring that to you, as well as our expat, Charlie Ralston, to talk about being an expat in Beijing. So I will just bid everybody adieu. Thanks for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you all again on Where in the World as we continue to explore China together. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.